That are subscribed to my channel, it should be no surprise to you that Metallica is my favorite band of all time, as I'm wearing it right here. I'm going to talk about the two worst fan bases ever, which I'm going to get to later, and that Star Wars is my favorite movie franchise of all time, as you can tell by the R2-D2 hat. But the biggest downfall to being a big fan of those two things is that I am a part of two of the most toxic and cancerous fan bases of all time. I'm going to give you guys an in-depth reasons of why these so-called fans of those two things don't even care about them and are only pretty much at this point calling themselves fans to bully or harass people that don't share their tastes. I actually already did something like this in my reviews of The Force Awakens, but when I came across a moronic video called Star Wars Like Metallica Will Never Be Good Again, I kind of felt prompt to make a video of why Star Wars and Metallica are great for what they are today. Both when they began and when they grew from the awfulness that they once were in the middle of their when the late 90s hit, which I'm going to get to later. But first I'll give you a rundown of why these people are dumb as horseshit, which, by the way, I don't even know that Star Wars fans would know a single thing about Metallica other than their song Enter Sandman. So I don't even think any so-called Star Wars purist would understand this video, but whatever. I'm going to make it because one word, catharsis. So, if you guys really think Star Wars and Metallica suck today and will never be good again, prepare to be proven wrong. Well, not proven wrong, but show why you guys are the most moronic absolutists I've ever seen. These fans always ramble on how the product they love is so superior in the 20th century and pull ambiguous and preposterous nonsense out of their ass, saying they only care about making money and milking their material with each content of theirs released. They look back and rethink some of the previous content they used to hate, and only hate to fit in the idiotic media, and never once bother to give swell arguments that make at least 1% logic, and always overlook and ignore why people love the new content released by them. What am I talking about exactly? If you said Metallica, you're wrong, because these so-called Metallica purists, 80s Metallica purists to be more precise, only dwell in the fucking 80s. They never rethought anything after the Black Album too, to be fair. If you also said Star Wars, you're also wrong, because the prequels were released in the 2000s. Actually, classic Star Wars purists don't actually care about the prequels. They just use them as a tool of how they're supposedly superior, all because they are not a so-called SJW movie or movies owned by Disney. These so-called Star Wars fans and so-called Metallica fans tend to fucking blend in one another. They completely mix and completely parallel and completely fit one another. Which I'm gonna talk about more in this video here, don't worry. Their toxicity speaks volumes to the media, and it really damages my heart to even say this, but even Directioners and Believers have more sanity than these so-called Star Wars and Metallica fans. It really breaks my heart to say that. At least Directioners and Believers don't hate on any new material from their idols to fit in what the media says. They don't care what the media thinks, they just accept their new material for what it is. And they also don't behave like pure edgelords whenever they see someone they don't agree with, whenever they dislike or like whatever new materials is released by One Direction or Justin Bieber. But we are not here to talk about them. This is about Star Wars and Metallica fans, if I could even call them fans in the first place. Metallica released a mind-blowing, fast-paced album in 1983, decently Commercially successful, badass production, great distortion, and even great drumming for the most part. Don't know why Lars, even from the most hardcore fans, gets so much flack when there's so much worse drummers like Meg White from the White Stripes in the world, and just straight up raw heavy metal attitude, or thrash metal for lack of a better term or comparison. And then the second album, just like the second Star Wars movie, is the big-time fan favorite of the franchise and/or discography, well, minus the Black Album. It featured a heavy metal ballad too, might I add. Fight Fire with Fire was an intense thrashing metal song. Ride the Lightning had an iconic masterpiece solo for whom the Bell Tools managed to be a pure, heavy, and awesome as fuck, even without going fast at all, and so on. A near-perfect album. Escape, however, is kinda weak, but the best song on there, and it's my favorite Metallica song of all time, well, more like a favorite song in general, is Creeping Death. Signature guitar solo, phenomenal intro, intense pacing, and irresistible to headbanging. Just a shame they never didn't play it live when I saw them in Gillette Stadium last year for the first time in my life. And then you get to another beloved masterpiece album, my favorite album, Master of Puppets. It may be overrated, but its higher ratings are justified. Absolutely no song on there is for beginners if they want to play the real guitar like me. Not even Welcome Home Sanitarium or The Thing That Should Not Be. And then And Justice for All was released in 1988, 2 years after the unfortunate and tragic death of Cliff Burton. Bus crash was a horrific way to die, and I'm not just saying this because Cliff is dead, but he really was a unique bass player. You'd realize that if you gave songs like Pulling Teeth their instrumental on Kill 'Em All, For Whom the Bell Tools, Orion, and such others a listen. The only gripe I have with And Justice for All is that the bass was majorly hazed. Kind of like how everyone's primary gripe about Return of the Jedi is the Ewoks. I could only hear the bass in songs like in the self-titled song and the choruses and outro to the guitar solo. But hey, after all, that's the album that transitioned me into not only a massive Metallica fanatic, but also a metalhead. As soon as I heard the guitar riff to Blackened, my mind looked purely identical to the explosion of the Death Star. I was insanely blown away. I never heard anything as badass as Metallica before when I was 10 years old Christmas weekend, about to be turning 11 when January 7th, 2008 hit. And then there's another fan favorite album by them, their self-titled Black Album. It's not the best album ever, but certainly likable. All anybody could point to regarding that album, or regarding anybody that claims to be the most massive Metallica fan in the world, well, not really, that pretty much only plays Guitar Hero, only knows them because the Guitar Hero is Enter Sandman, Sad But True. Guys, you really need to do research and re-listen to a ton of songs. There's more to that album than just Enter Sandman. I mean, they're great songs, but not qualified to be the top 40 best. In my opinion, at least. Wherever I May Room, the two ballads, Nothing Else Matters, and The Unforgiven, My Friend in Misery, A Wolf and Man, Holier Than Thou, which I would not be surprised if that song title was dedicated to their fans and Star Wars fans, since they all tend to act holier than thou just because they hate on whatever is released these days in the 21st century. And then Load and Reload, released in the late 90s. Both of them were meh. But hey, at least it's not like their heavy metal nor thrash roots. Just because it's not their roots of heavy metal or thrash metal roots doesn't mean it was awful. It had plenty of diamonds like King Nothing, Until It Sleeps, Hero of the Day, And Mama Said, The Unforgiven 2, Attitude, Where the Wild Things Are, The Memory Remains, and my ultimate favorite of those two albums, which is the first Metallica song I ever heard thanks to NASCAR and NBC and Hot Wheels Turbo Racing, Fuel. Give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. Ooh. Good albums? Not really. Are they bad albums? Certainly not. Do I respect anyone that loves them and or hates them? Yes. Do I think you're a douchebag if you try to force feed your absolutist standards down someone else's throat? Fuck yes! Load and Reload are similar to the Phantom Menace in the sense that Metallica at least tried to experimentally succeed with a new spin on things that are completely void from the classics. Just like how George Lucas tried a new spin on things with the Phantom Menace, but failed so miserably, as it was completely void of the legendary original trilogy we remembered it as. I seriously want to like the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, but both of them are boring as fuck, which I'll get to later. Well, for Metallica, I wouldn't say they failed, but for the Phantom Menace, it was a massive failure and a laughing stock of the Star Wars franchise, and anyone that thinks the Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones is superior to the sequel trilogy just because of quantity of planets or starships has to be absent from their minds. They say Luke Skywalker was ruined as a character when they can't even look back at how derailed characters like C-3PO, Darth Vader, Yoda, Boba Fett, and so on were majorly ruined, worse than what they put Luke Skywalker out to be. At least with Luke Skywalker's character in The Last Jedi, it portrays how much of a realistically flawed character he is. I can absolutely relate to his mistake when he nearly inflicted intimidation on Kylo Ren too. Not in the sense that I tried to kill someone in their sleep, but rather in the sense that I unintentionally caused a flame war against my former enemies, who used to be my former friends, but I'm cool with them now. Luke Skywalker, just like on his father in Return of the Jedi, unintentionally lashed out onto Kylo Ren. He is human. All humans make mistakes, and Luke Skywalker, because of that mistake, left a psychological scar on himself, prompting him to go into hiding on Ahch-To, making him feel guilty of what he did. And I'm guilty of many things that I've done in the past, which I'd rather not get into. I couldn't blame him for at least not wanting to train Rey at first, because he didn't want to make the same mistake he did in the past. But anyways, back to recapping Metallica's history. 2003, they released their worst album ever, which is the lowest of the low, just like how Attack of the Clones was Star Wars' worst film ever and the lowest of the low. There was like 3 songs, such as the self-titled The Unnamed Feeling and Frantic, but that I like, but after that, I really hate everything else. You see, with albums like Load and Reload, and as an average appreciator of music, they are great albums, but as Metallica albums, they are a big thorn up my ass. Well, not really, because there are quite a few diamonds on the rough spot. But for Saint Anger, both for Metallica and average appreciators of music, are not good albums whatsoever. I'm not saying music sucks whenever they don't have guitar solos, but for a band like Metallica, which pretty much their signature for guitar riffs are solos, it's kind of stale. Lyrics are also stale, terrible production, no memorable riffs or song structures. It was all pretty bad. It was the lowest of the low, just like Attack of the Clones in Star Wars' case. Ironically, both Attack of the Clones and Saint Anger almost released in the same year, 1 year apart, might I add. 2002 for Attack of the Clones, 2003 for Saint Anger. There's almost no redeeming qualities within Attack of the Clones nor Saint Anger, Anybody that thinks they're superior to the two latest installments, Death Magnetic / The Force Awakens, Hardwired to Self-Destruct / Last Jedi, has to have the smallest brains I have ever encountered. Actually, brains are not even relevant to these people that could even somewhat remotely think those two rhino turds are superior to the two latest installments of Star Wars and Metallica. I wouldn't be surprised if they said a steaming pile of rhino shit tastes better with pizza, tastes better than pizza with mushrooms, olives, and bacon. And you have to be on crack to dislike bacon. Everybody loves bacon. Well, not everybody, but a large majority of the world loves bacon. Except for vegans. Say what you will about The Last Jedi, The Force Awakens, Hardwired, and Death Magnetic, but at least I am convinced they passionately know what Star Wars and Metallica is all about. Death Magnetic, just like The Force Awakens, used nostalgic formula to bring Metallica back to its roots, just like how The Force Awakens brought Star Wars back to their roots, too. Star Wars and Metallica all had their low points. And want to know why I never gave up on them? Want to know why? Because I always believed in what I loved the most. I always believed they would come back and remind me when they were the best in the world. Star Wars, when the sequel trilogy started becoming in development, and Metallica did it when they released Death Magnetic and Hardwired to Self-Destruct. They learned from their failures and low points and became products far better than they ever were before. To quote Yoda from The Last Jedi, greatest teacher failure is. Next point I want to make is that none of these Star Wars or Metallica fans make any coherent or civilized point of why Star Wars and Metallica these days suck, so all they spew out of their filthy mouths is ludicrous and ambiguous straw man arguments like, this sellout, they care about money, they're not passionate. Anybody that likes the new content are nothing more than a shill or a poser, ready to Mary Sue, it's all fan service, and more bogus claims like, this is Star Wars is nothing but TIE fighters and X-Wings over and over again. It is? Last time I checked, the last of the few X-Wing fleet in The Last Jedi in the Radis hangar were destroyed and disintegrated by a single TIE silencer alone. Is this ridiculous argument even warranting of an answer? Why put emphasis on starfighters than the actual story and grand scheme of things anyway? I get it can sometimes get old after a while, but hey, the whole TIE Fighters versus X-Wing sequences are much more fresh than it looked in the original trilogy in the 70s and 80s. You have to be blind if you only see TIE Fighters and X-Wings used by the First Order / Resistance. Why is this even an argument? Trying to reason with Metallica and Star Wars fans is like trying to hear a fart in a hurricane. What about Back to the Future? Is that nothing more than a DeLorean going back and forth in time? All of these points are constantly sprinting like a plague with less than zero in-depth thought behind those arguments, when those arguments can be said against anything else regarding movies or music in the 80s. I have debunked the large majority of these bullshit arguments, so it would be a waste of time if I rehashed it all here, especially regarding the whole Mary Sue dog shit that has been debunked up the dick hole over and over again. This video is all about the common stupidity that Metallica and Star Wars fans share. Absolutely nothing pleases Star Wars fans nor Metallica fans. Remember how, along with millions of other Star Wars fans, point out that the prequels are hated because they're too different, and The Force Awakens is hated because it's too similar to the originals, and that The Last Jedi is hated because it's too balanced? Well, with Metallica fan brats, they hated Load and Reload and Saint Anger for not being in the thrash metal genre, but when Metallica returned to the thrash metal genre in 2008, they still got shat on. they still shit on it for being a thrash metal band, like they've always been. Make up your minds, you idiots, just like how Star Wars fans still shit on Star Wars. Make up your fucking minds, you fickle pricks. This is why nobody with a functioning brain like me should take you seriously. You jump from one bandwagon to the next with little to no professional critical thinking and only zero in on what the moronic media says. I don't live life in the rear view mirror. I live it looking through the windshield. Unlike you anti-Disney twats, I give a well, in-depth, sagacious, and... Oh, I need a drink. Unlike you morons, I give a well sagacious and well thought out manner about why I do not like the prequels and love the sequels and love Metallica from 2008 to now. And 1991 and under, by the way. Star Wars, just like Metallica, are the most misunderstood and taken out of context products on the planet. And judging by professional critics like Hello Greedo, Jenny Nicholson, and Chris Stuckman, which you guys should definitely check out these guys if you haven't, and much more, I am not the only one that has enough logic to see the good in this new trilogy. Prequel apologists, I don't give a damn if prequels expanded the universe with new planets, new ships, new starfighters, new factions, etc. What the original and sequel trilogy that the prequels do not have is heart, soul, and passion. Prequels, on the other hand, have a less than zero heart, less than zero soul, less than zero passion. The only good things about the prequels were Obi-Wan, Palpatine, the legendary score that sends chills down my spines, the beautiful new planets, new starfighters, etc., pod racing, and much more. Well, not even much more, because a lot of the prequel trilogy is horseshit. Great ideas, but god-awful direction, god-awful execution, god-awful writing, god-awful scripting, you get the drift. I'm not going to give a piss about how the prequel trilogy expanded the universe if it's not executed well whatsoever. It's like glitter. It looks pretty, it looks absolutely gorgeous, but there's little to no substance within it. Kind of like a car with a cool paint scheme, not having any tires, wheels, engine, or whatever installed within it. Not functional. If none of you liked what I had to say, go write my username or print out my face on a punching bag and then hit it. How dare you have a sagacious and well thought out opinions on the sequel trilogy. The prequels are better because of my precious lightsaber fights. Original material means better material. My precious Jar Jar Binks, Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, Count Dooku, Padme, General Grievous shall never be insulted. Also, I am sick of recapping over and over why I'm insanely glad Star Wars nowadays is completely void from the prequels nowadays. But I will recap another thing I really loathed about the prequels. Jedis cannot marry because form of love will lead you to the dark side? That does not make any sense or logic. How can you prequel apologists make up the most bogus defense for such bullshit writing like this? That is the dumbest fucking horseshit I've ever seen in Star Wars history. Say what you will about The Last Jedi, but The Last Jedi never said anything as ridiculous as that. How the hell are you gonna reproduce more living beings in order to keep the Jedi Order going? Are living beings just gonna appear through fairy dust or from mud like the Bible? Get that shit out of here. If you're gonna if you're gonna try to convince me that Star Wars prequels are good because it parallels religious stories, then you're kind of failing, because I am a hardcore atheist that's not gonna take any of that garbage seriously in the first place. And that's the thing. The fact that you'll be expelled from the Jedi Council if a few natural human is pure absurd horseshit. The original trilogy never implied anything as bogus as that crap. The mishandling of Anakin is what I hated more than anything about the prequels, and I could go on for several hours why I do not like the prequels and why my dislike for them is majorly misunderstood, just like with everyone else that feels the same way. Just like the sequel trilogy and Metallica as a band are highly misunderstood. But I thought I could just recap one thing that made absolutely little to no fucking sense whatsoever. That so-called plot point was there as a goddamn weak attempt to force why Anakin turned to the dark side, which was really rushed, by the way. Seriously, subdued by love? It was implied in the original trilogy that he was just subdued by fucking power, taking advantage of the Force powers to the point of wanting to be turned into a fat, badass fucking villain in a robot suit. As Mr. Plinkett said, he was just some weirdo in a robot suit. He was not Space Jesus. There was nothing said about it. I've said this nonstop before. No wonder Alec Guinness hated Star Wars, and if he were still alive today, he'd be face-palming to death about how stupid Star Wars fans are, because the prequels are so much worse than how he made the original trilogy out to be with all the fairy tale nonsense. Well, the prequels are the pure epitome of bullshit like that. Also, to the morons that say the prequels were not made in an attempt for a cash grab, do you even realize how massive and intense the marketing was for the prequels? Darth Vader was not even in Revenge of the Sith for 5 minutes. He was only there at the end, and they still put him on cereal boxes, Cheez-It boxes, toothbrushes, dishes, plastic bottles, soda drinks, Pop-Tart boxes. Hell, the marketing for the Star Wars prequels even went as far as sponsoring fucking NASCAR. So do not even try to convince me that the marketing was intense for the prequel era. The same shit can be said for Darth Maul. He was not even written in the prequels, and it was highly unnecessary to kill him off that early, till he was resurrected by the Clone Wars at least. You call that a story? Get that shit out of here. Where they market the big bad guy and only says 3 lines, duels against 2 Jedi we have no emotional connection to, then dies? We were never given why we should root against him in the first place. I know you guys could say the same for Snoke, but at least Snoke was used as a plot device to show the intense struggle of Kylo Ren, and how he was fallen from grace. At least Snoke served a purpose, unlike Darth Maul, and at least he was given more than 3 damn lines. Boy. Maul, on the other hand, was never given anything other than to piss around and say 3 boring lines. Sorry, I've said this multiple times. A tattooed face does not make up a lack of dimension. Neither does a double-sided lightsaber. He was unwritten and showed no purpose other than to throw in a lightsaber fight to make the fanboys cream themselves. The lightsaber fight was entertaining, but there was no story nor ground being made around it. I have no emotional engagement within it. Why in the fuck did you kill off Darth Maul so early? Just for an excuse for more Star Wars villain toys in the other 2 prequels, like Count Dooku and Jango Fett, which horribly ruined Boba Fett's origins, by the way. That explains it, since General Grievous felt massively tacked on. Hell, the marketing campaign for the Star Wars prequels was so massive it even prompted George Lucas to even ruin the original trilogy with CGI additions, when the original trilogy, for the most part, was not even broken in the first place. Also even went as far as re-releasing the first 6 films in 3D with the new horrid special editions in cinema. How the fuck is that not mass marketing to you prequel apologists? How is that not selling out? You have to be the biggest hypocrites in the world to think that George Lucas didn't care about marketing the prequels and Star Wars as a whole up the ass prior to 2012. He even sold the damn franchise for $4 billion. There was no reason for the prequels to exist in the first place. They are just wannabe space operas, if I can even call them that, trying to capitalize the success of the franchise like anything else a part of a massive franchise like Pixar, DC, Marvel, Fast and Furious, and so on. Pretty pathetic that Star Wars failed to understand its own source material with the prequels. I sometimes wonder if they even watched the original trilogy before even writing a rough draft for these damn movies. Said it before, I'll say it again. We never needed the politics behind everything or how the war came to be. Star Wars solely has always been about the war existing. Does its own title ever compute in your minds? For the backstory to the original trilogy, we learned that Yoda trained Obi-Wan, who then trained and befriended Anakin, and then got seduced by the dark side of the Force, and then assisted an evil galactic empire to rule the galaxy. So there you go, I told you all the interesting parts of the prequel trilogy. Everything else is massive filler to appease the fans. Pointless, boring filler. Thank you, Sam's channel, or Sam Gaben, whatever your last name is pronounced. Was Yoda with a lightsaber not enough to tell you that's fan appeasement? They over-explain shit to the point that ruins the lore and source material of Star Wars. The virgin birth is a perfect example. It's stupid enough that people actually believe it in real life that virgin birth of Jesus Christ occurred, but to have it ruin Star Wars? Get that shit out of here. Sometimes less is definitely more. You know, it's not even Star Wars that's a victim of George Lucas's history of massive intense marketing and poor directing. As if it wasn't bad enough, George Lucas damaged Star Wars and everything great about it, he also ruined Indiana Jones. He knew the success of both of those franchises and knew if he made new installments for both of them, both franchises would have a massive successful marketing campaigns. So don't tell me there was any manipulation. Well, not manipulation. Rather, playing on people's expectations. There is absolutely no coherent nor consistent story within either Indiana Jones Kingdom of the Crystal Skull nor the prequel trilogy. Hell, I didn't even know the word story was somewhat remotely relevant to the prequel trilogy. Disney, I am glad you saved Star Wars and backed off and brought back the energy, the magic and wonder, the roots and excitement, the investment that it was missing in the prequel trilogy. Keep up the good work you guys do. At least J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson understand Star Wars as a whole and knew the whole midichlorian is a bunch of bullshit that does not compute with the Force mythology, and more importantly, understand that Star Wars is not about how the war or factions came to be. I'm not saying the sequel trilogy is perfect, but it's the best shit we've got since Star Wars. We've got in Star Wars since everything George Lucas touched. The thing is, we never got to know Anakin as a person or character, nor why we should sympathize with him. All we learn about is why he's angry. The biggest missed opportunity is that we were never shown his training sequence, so we're apparently supposed to just assume he was trained off screen. There was no growth within his character, no evolution we got to experience, no grace within him, nothing. Anakin is nothing more than a two-dimensional whiny brat perverted psychopath. I have less than zero relations and investment to him. And on the topic of Metallica getting shit hurled at for being supposed sellouts, I highly doubt anyone that spews the word sellout at Metallica don't even know what that word means. A sellout, in my point of view, is someone or something is doing shit that you do not have the desire or passion for, or doing shit that does not compute your style for the sake of becoming a billionaire. Well, Not exactly a billionaire, but you get the drift. The point is still intact. Metallica, if they were truly sellouts, they would be pandering to the metalcore style to sell their albums, and metalcore is majorly popular in the mainstream. Well, at least it was in the late 2000s and early 2010s, and I'm not entirely against metalcore, by the way. I like quite a few metalcore bands myself, which I'm not going to get into right now, as that's not the topic of this video. You know, that's as if Metallica were as much as sellouts as you morons make them out to be. Thrash metal is not even mainstream, and get this, thrash metal, which is their style they got recognition for in the 80s, is what they returned to their roots for in Death Magnetic. You know, kind of like how Star Wars returned to their roots with The Force Awakens, and continued it to Hardwired to Self-Destruct in Metallica's case in 2016. James can still sing. Does it really matter if he does not sound identical to his younger self? Not only do you idiots sound massively stupid and make arbitrary criticisms towards him, but also aren't uninformed. He has maintained the rawness within his voice better than most musicians these days. At least he takes care of his voice in practices and warm-ups, and the fact that he does take lessons kinda does show he wants to improve his vocal abilities, which he does. He has plenty of singing harmonies in songs like Moth in the Flame and Spit Out the Bone. Don't believe me? Assuming they do suck because they made three sellout albums in 1996 to 2003, what about Pantera? Before their album Cowboys from Hell, which is the album everyone thinks is their debut, they released 4 glam metal albums prior to 1990 in the 80s, and glam metal back in the 80s was insanely popular and mainstream as fuck. And they didn't even have big recognition. They only toured locally in Texas. They never did big world tours. And once it started to decline in the 90s thanks to the rise of grunge and more groovy, industrial type metal, Pantera transitioned to groove thrash metal. So does Pantera suck for supposedly jumping the bandwagon too? Do they suck for making commercially successful albums to try to make money? Well, not try to make money, but you get the drift. What about Judas Priest with their radio-friendly album Turbo from 1986? Judas Priest is one of the primary pioneers of heavy metal. They incorporated many styles within their music, even going as far as using some power metal edge to their music in their album Redeemer of the Souls in 2014, one of their later albums. So are you saying Judas Priest only cares about money based on Turbo and a few other commercial albums from them? It's like my good friend Rainer in Shade says, what you need to remember is that every band, movie industry you know started from the bottom and didn't buy their way to success, which is highly uncommon. If money and exposure means selling out, then that must mean every single movie industry or band must be sellouts just because they make money, unless if they're so underground you're their only fan. Another thing is, music is Metallica's job, just like film productions is Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, Gareth Edwards, and Rian Johnson's job. Do you want Star Wars to be a poor franchise? Do you want Metallica to be a poor band? Because that's what you sound like when movies and bands are making money. Why does it even matter in the first place that movie industries and bands want to make money? That does not prove that money is all they care about. you do have to care about money, otherwise you won't afford the money for food, gas, water bill, house bills, student loans, depending on the situation, which, by the way, the actor of Rose even spent her whole paycheck on her student loans, and so on. But you can still be passionate about movies and music while still making money to survive and keep funding the band and movie franchise. And don't be giving me the, oh wow, way to copy Mandarin Shades. What I'm saying is pure common sense, dimwit. I've had this idea long before I even joined the internet. He's uploaded that word analysis video last year in 2017, and I had this common sense long before 2017. If you want to watch the video yourself, link is in the description down below. Don't be slandering me for sharing common sense with a rational person like Ranter and Shades. He even said it was okay. I spoke with him on Facebook, which I am personal friends with him on Facebook. And keep in mind, he's not even a Star Wars fan. With a band as good as Metallica and a movie franchise like Star Wars that is legendary as they fucking are, I would love it if they got more exposure, because given that Metallica is arguably the best heavy metal band of all time and that Star Wars is the best movie franchise of all time, their massive success on money is pretty deserving, don't you think? Why? Because I care about them and want them to be successful. I understand you morons want to be a special, unique snowflake by pandering to the past, but it's ridiculous how you spew out buzzwords like poser and shill at people that like something that you don't. Getting exposure and making a living for yourself with your filmmaking and music is great, and that should not be frowned upon. I'm going to be honest with one hardcore truth. Anybody that calls me a Disney show for liking The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi is not a fan of Star Wars. You are not a true loyal fan of Star Wars if you have a bogus argument like that, and I hate using the true fan card a lot, but with bogus, arbitrary bullshit like that, I really do think you're not a true loyal fan if you're be as trivial and inconsequential like that. And you are also not a true metalhead if you pull the real Metallica fan horseshit out of your ass to justify your disliking of Death Magnetic and Hardwired to Self-Destruct. And if you don't like my honesty, not my problem in the tiniest bit possible. That is yours. And if you are going to say bullshit like, you are afraid of giving The Last Jedi and Metallica's modern music going as criticism, do you fucking realize how stupid as fucking horseshit you sound? I am allowed to have an opinion, okay? Same with the critics on Rotten Tomatoes. If anything, these critics should be afraid of saying The Last Jedi is at least 1% decent, because an angry mob is pretty much being thrown at them right now. Because anything sagacious and well thought out positive opinion on the movie is always disregarded by the most moronic fans with horrible reductive thinking. Stop dwelling in your outdated childhood and get over yourselves. Stop pissing on competent films and albums for your desire to relive 30 years ago, or 10 years ago, and if you want to suck the cocks of the prequels. I gave my sagacious and well thought out in-depth reasons of why I like The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, and you all still ignore what I have to say about those completely competent films. Just like how metal elitists ignore why Death Magnetic and other post-80s content from Metallica are completely likable and competent, except for Saint Anger, of course. That album blows dick. And if anyone on here has the balls to say what I like about The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, some of Load and Reload, Death Magnetic, or Hardwired to Self-Destruct are just me making excuses, I give you a 1, 2, fuck you. That right there is nothing more than a ridiculous straw man argument. Go fuck yourselves. While I may look like I have more screws loose up inside my head than characters' horror movie, but I know what I am talking about! At the end of the day, Star Wars fans and Metallica fans are the same shit, different toilet. These guys' whiny behavior and edgelord arbitrary bullshit has zero redeeming qualities. You guys only give me more reasons to love Star Wars and Metallica the way they are, both in the past and modern days. I will never zero in on your guys' stupidity. Your bullshit will never corrupt my mind. For you idiots to say I'm not a Star Wars fan for liking Star Wars films, and to say I'm not a real metalhead for liking heavy metal produced albums? Seriously, do you fucking idiots realize how wrong and moronic you sound? Oxymoronic, for a lack of a better term? God damn. Get off with the real fan nonsense and get that shit out of here. Why do you idiots care so much about my liking of new content from Star Wars and Metallica anyway? You sanctimonious turds always go from asking me a rhetorical question of why I like them and then belittle my sagacious and well thought out opinions of why I do like them. It's like first your original arguments against Metallica and Star Wars' modern content didn't work, so then you revert to sensationalism by calling me a shill or not a true fan or a poser or whatnot. Because you idiots going on a massive tirade against Metallica and Star Wars for staying true to themselves in the 2010s, like always had, is totally truthful within you. If you want the old Star Wars and Metallica back so fucking bad, go back to their 20th century content and leave us loyal fans the goddamn fuck alone. There is no such thing as old or new Star Wars or old or new Metallica. They are timeless. As Lars Ulrich said, if it says Metallica on the record, it's Metallica.